All right. All right, welcome to the March 3rd, 2020 Board of Selectmen's meeting. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, welcome everybody. All right, citizen statements and petitions. Seeing none. All right, see, we have some correspondence to the board to request for a memorial installation at the Taft Library. Come on up. How are you?
Hi, thanks for having us.
And you are?
Melissa Glowa.
Hi, Melissa.
Hi.
I'm Kelly Leisure.
Hi, Kelly.
These are just examples.
Okay,
Just wanted to share them.
thank you.
Thanks.
Okay. So we have a vinyl cozy retreat pergola.
Does it come with a pool?
There's no room at the library.
It's too bad. It would be nice.
So tell us what you're trying to do.
We have a memorial fund for my husband who recently passed away. And we would like to, we have two small children. We live in Mendon. We have two small children that love the library. We spend a lot of time there. And we would like to make that patio they have in the back of the library a more user-friendly space. We were thinking, we went to the Board of Trustees meeting a couple of weeks ago. We presented the idea to them. They were very receptive and approved for us to come and speak to you with the idea. So the pergola that we have there would be a vinyl pergola, benches, rubber mulch, something that would make the space, again, more usable for book clubs, Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts, another town space that we could have on the registry with permission and, make it a space that everybody could use in town.
And nothing that would need to be maintained. We would put a storage box in the back for seat cushions or anything that we left there. But it would be furniture that stayed out. It would be weatherproof furniture. So we wouldn't be storing it anywhere. We wouldn't need any maintenance. We're not doing any gardening. So we're gonna have someone come build it. We would like to have someone come build it, dig out a little space around the concrete pad just to make it a little bit bigger for the footings for the pergola and just to make it a comfortable seating for the kids.
It would be 100% paid for by the memorial fund that we have set in place.
Okay. It sounds like a great idea, and I'm really sorry for your loss.
Thank you.
Gosh.
Yeah, I don't have any problem with it at all.
Okay.
I think it's a great idea.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Yeah, I'll take a motion.
So moved. I move to authorize Kelly Lucia to have a memorial installed at the Taft Library on the existing brick pad on the town Mendon Taft Library property.
I'll step down in a second. Any further discussion on that? All in favor?
Aye?
Aye.
Thank you for your
very
time.
much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good luck.
Thank you.
Let's see, we're going to consider a charity alcohol license, Friends of Hopedale Library, Willowbrook Restaurant. Come on up. How are you? Tell us who you are and what you're trying to do.
I'm Diane Rossi. I'm on the executive board of the Friends of the Hopedale Library.
Gary Nichols, part of the Friends of the Hopedale Library.
I am Barbara Fadden. I am also part of the executive board of the Friends of the Library.
Okay.
So for a number of years, the Friends has used as a fundraising event to have a wine tasting, and Willowbrook was gracious enough to offer us their space, and so that's what brings us here. So we have a one-day license. It would be April 30th. They have a particular room that has a maximum of 50 people. The hours would be between 6:30 and 8:30. We need the half an hour to set up before, and then the half an hour after 8:30, so we'll go from 6 to 9 for the whole event, but the alcohol consumption would only be between 6:30 and 8:30. and we would have donation only, and we would be checking IDs. One of the executive board members would be in the front checking IDs. We would ask people to pre-register, but there might be folks that try to walk in, so we would make sure there was somebody there.
Who's going to be doing the pouring?
Icon Imports?
Who is it?
Icon Imports?
Icon? Okay, and are they tip certified and all that other stuff that they're supposed to be?
They are distributors, and they are doing in-store tastings on a fairly regular basis.
Okay. Okay. What was confusing to me about this, Kim, was the Willowbrook already has an alcohol license. That's what was,
We were told, just to give some background, by Susan Brower of the Hopedale Town Selectmen, that there's a new procedure in place to have this done, to facilitate this. You're right, once a person had a liquor license, they were all set, or we could apply for a special one day and have it wherever. Yet, it's to have the different boards or the different organizations being all in communication, utilizing the process to facilitate that communication.
The
I understand.
ABCC mandates it.
the ABCC mandates it?
They do,
Okay.
and they meet the requirements, they filled out all the paperwork. If you approve this, it goes to the ABCC, and then they investigate Icon reports.
Okay, okay, all right. I don't have any other questions.
I would imagine it's because Icon Imports is supplying them the wine and doing the pour.
Okay.
Whereas the restaurant really isn't. So they're-
Correct.
they're
Okay, it's a
losing
little
their
overlap.
liability from it to an extent, for sure.
I got you,
Right.
okay.
I don't have any other questions.
All right, good, I'll take a
I
motion.
move to approve the Friends of Hopedale Library charity wine license for their event at Willowbrook Restaurant, 16 Hastings Street, on April 30th, 2020, from 6 to 9 p.m.
I'll step down a second. Any further discussion on that? All in favor? All right, thank you very much.
Greatly appreciate it.
Thank you so
Have a
much.
great event.
Appreciate all of that.
You're welcome. Let's see.
Nothing.
Okay. All right. So this is- Thank you. Let's see, consider renewal of seasonal license. So we have George's Surf and Turf, common vicular license. Take a motion on that, Lonnie. Hey, Mark.
I move to approve the seasonal renewal common vic license for George's Surf and Turf, 116 Uxbridge Road, pending receipt of positive routing slips.
I'll take a second on that. Now that Mark's here.
Second.
All right. Any discussion on that? All in favor?
Aye.
All right. All right. Another one, S&C Flowers, Hawker Peddlers, transient vendors license. I'm gonna take a motion on that one too.
Yeah. Both easements. I move to approve the seasonal renewal Hawker Peddlers transient vendor license for S&C Flowers, DBA Lambert's, 1 Cape Road, pending receipt of positive routing slips.
Second. Any discussion on that?
Yes, didn't we find that if they have a state light permit, that our bylaw doesn't require one?
Oh,
I just, we can review it later, no need for discussion tonight, but I know that we ran into this with,
right.
I forget, I can't even remember who it was now, but,
We'll follow up on that.
yeah. I don't know that we even need to give them, oh, right.
No, so if we approve it and we didn't need to do it anyways,
It doesn't
it's a move. Yeah, so, yeah, move on, all right, so. All right, all in favor on that?
Aye.
All right. All right. Let's see. To consider accepting Safe Community Grant from Enbridge.
Good evening. Real briefly, early last fall, Lieutenant Jason Bangma came to me about a grant program through Enbridge, which is the parent company for Algonquin Gas, which is one of the pipelines that go through town, with the idea of using this grant to replace our thermal imaging camera, which dates back to 2002, one of the original ones. So Jason took care of filling out the application and going through the process, and they did award us a grant for $7,000 for the purchase of that camera. So I do have a check here, I just need the board to vote to accept it.
All right, I'll take a motion.
Move to accept the Safe Communities grant from Enbridge in the amount of $7,000 for the purchase of a new thermal imaging camera.
Second. All right, all in favor? Aye. I don't think anybody's gonna turn down $7,000. Great job, thank you very much.
Yeah, and thank you to Enbridge for the support of the community.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's awesome.
Yeah, thank you.
The next one's for you guys.
This is for you, Chief, also, right? Yeah, so consider amending a liquid propane storage license, 7 Morrison Drive.
So, back in 2012 timeframe, Arcudi Oil had brought forward a license application and did receive a license for the storage of propane at their site on Morrison Drive. The license was for enough gas, I think it was 140 or 160,000 gallons of propane, but they only installed 2 of the 3 tanks that they had planned at that time. They went through the process to install the 3rd tank over this past fall, and that included going through Department of Fire Services at the state level. When they came out to inspect the installation to give the final blessing on it, they realized that the chain link fence around the tanks was only 6 feet tall, and the plan that was submitted as part of this 3rd tank had an 8-foot fence on the plan. The state, our code compliance, regional code compliance officer said he really didn't have a problem with it. He was going to check with the fire protection engineer. He did. They don't have a problem with it, other than it's a town issue, because I looked back to try and find out where the problem happened. When the board at the time in 2012 issued the license, they did have a specific requirement written onto that license application, or the granting of the license, that said there needed to be an 8-foot fence around those tanks. I don't know how it was missed in the inspection back in 2012, but there is a 6-foot fence there. I'm comfortable with it, Department of Fire Services is comfortable with it, but their permit to utilize that tank is just awaiting a decision on the board as to whether you'd like to amend that previous requirement for the fencing to 6 feet from 8 feet.
I mean, me personally, I mean, you're the authority having jurisdiction, Chief. I mean, if you don't have a problem with it, then...
Yeah, they've got a gate that comes across their driveway at night to close it up and secure it. Quite frankly, if somebody's gonna go over a 6-foot fence, they're gonna go over an 8-foot fence.
Sure.
I think it honors, or it provides a level of protection that you want, that just nobody can walk through there not really knowing what they're doing. They really have to make an effort.
So it's the purpose of security, it's not a safety issue thing?
It's a combination. They do have lolly columns around as well for vehicle safety. But yeah, if somebody's driving a car, it'll help to hold them back a little bit. But it's more just protecting around that area.
I move to amend the current restriction on the liquid propane storage license for Devaney Energy, formerly Arcudi Oil, 7 Morrison Drive, to modify the fence height requirements from 8 to 6 feet.
Second. Any further discussion on that? All in favor?
Aye.
All right.
Thank you.
All right, very good.
Thank you.
Discuss town property, Keller Williams.
I'll do the recap while Duncan is passing out the presentation. So you may recall twice, I've been to the board, but it recently is a couple of months ago to talk about getting true valuations for properties that we have, including Morrison Drive and Route 16, and in order to get accurate assessments of their value in order to be able to move forward in any capacity, whether through leasing or sale or otherwise. We really need to know what the value for these parcels or buildings is in their current condition. And so Duncan worked with the town previously to work on the parcels that are at Route 16 and helped us broker the solar. And so you may recall, we also went out to RFP in order to find a vendor, in which we did not get one, and so continued to work now with Duncan in order to move forward to actually help us potentially bring some revenue into the tax base.
Great, thanks for that intro, Kim. Yeah, so we've got a bit of a presentation here to kind of go through, but it's more of a guide. We're not going to go necessarily page by page. But the intent of tonight's meeting is to just review the 3 parcels that Kim has given us to take a look at. Also, if there's any questions on the contract, but I guess that would be more taken offline. Yep, that's fine. And then, obviously, in the discussions tonight, any guidance or input that you have to the work that's been done to date is certainly appreciated, so we can move these projects along. In talking with Kim and looking to see what Mendon wants to do, the intent here is to determine Mendon's asset monetization goals. Ken's already talked about the 3 particular sites. Those are 8 Morrison Drive, the North Street parcel that abuts Route 16 on Milford Street, and then also the remaining 10 acres on the Milford Street project that's literally in front of the solar farm that was already alluded to. So again, in talking with Kim, the intent here is to ensure that asset development or disposition is done in an open manner to allow the town to realize the successful completion of a project or projects to benefit the town. Encourage development potentially of multiple types of housing to be considered, affordable market rate housing, low and middle income family housing, and potentially senior housing. Encourage potentially a discussion around mixed use development of the 21-acre parcel off of North Street to potentially include retail, office, housing on that 21-acre town-owned parcel. Work to achieve compliance with Mass Chapter 40B, the 10% minimum for affordable housing. I think that Mendon is just under 5% on that, Kim, as we...
Almost nowhere.
Almost nowhere, yep. And again, that's, you don't have to feel like the Lone Ranger on that one. Many communities throughout the Commonwealth have that same challenge, and as new housing stock, single-family units continue to be added to a town's inventory, that even makes that number further and further away to get. So it's something that, every town has to try to achieve. And then dispose of excess town real estate to potentially create tax revenue whenever possible, as we had done with the solar project. So again, we're just going to go through the 3 properties that have been talked about and listed. In the package on Morrison Drive, as you know, the potential building that was going to be the police station sits on the same lot as the fire station. So the question is, how do we monetize that? How do we subdivide that? How do we create revenue for the town with that type of a situation? So I've already had discussions with the fire chief, and his concern, which obviously makes sense, is to try to mitigate any conflict with any type of use on that back lot, as far as driveway access, parking access. Worst situation could be right during commuting time when businesses are going out. He's got an emergency that he has to deal with. So how do we do that? The next stop was with the building inspector. Tim had some great insight, and clearly we don't have enough legal frontage, to accommodate 2 lots, on that lot. So then you turn to what are the available options, and obviously one of the options is to try to sell off the property to an abutter, and we have a number of abutters there. I think there's at least 2 that would qualify that could, if they acquired the property, owners of parcels 4 and also parcel 75 would be able to incorporate the new land and the building into a parcel that would in fact follow the town's zoning. So again, we've just done some preliminary work. I did have a chance to talk to Michael Jones, who's the owner of parcel 75, and he would be interested in acquiring that parcel. So, I mean, that's at least positive that we have one interested party. There, again, maybe a second. So the next question is, under the 30B process that the state mandates that we go out to public bid, this is a bit of a unique situation because the parcel is in fact landlocked if we aren't able to sell it off. So we're going to need to get the town council's opinion on that. Do we run a full 30B, or can we just go out to the abutters that would potentially be interested in buying? And then we would, come up with a market value for that property based on the existing building and the land that would be going with it.
Right, so just to jump in quickly, in terms of that specific location, knowing what the actual value is is crucial, because one of the key things that we need to know is what in addition to the monetary value, but what the value is of the existing structure as is to the town, in case we don't want to sell it and use it for another purpose.
Right.
So it's a little bit tricky. I mean,
Yeah, and we would certainly work parallel
right.
Programs at the same time.
Right.
Totally agree.
I just think it's important to note that the only option isn't just selling, it's potential reuse, municipal reuse in a different way, but being able to basically quantify it in any equation we put it into, we're trying to figure out a project.
Right, so we can certainly come up with a number on that. And then I think on the town's, position, you just need to figure out what possible uses of the many uses that you might consider, would go in there, and is that the right location, is that the right size? Obviously, it's a brand-new structure, unfinished inside, and it's, located in a quiet cul-de-sac, et cetera, et cetera. So I think those things would be kind of in parallel. We'd move that one along.
Just one thing to consider is if we do privately sell it, right now we have infrastructure that goes in between that lot and the fire station that we'll have to determine what we're going to do with that.
Yeah,
because it would be-
typically you would, certainly at the time of transfer, create a right-of-way for those utilities, to continue in their current position for the user in the back. Now, the new owner...
Actually, let me just jump in on that. It actually goes to
Connect.
the connect into the fire station, into the
Through
fire
the
station.
fire station,
Through the
right.
fire station, through the fire station's transformer, I think the low voltage is all Comcast, whatever it is, comes out of their handhole, so that could be a right of way, but the power utilities come straight out of the fire department, fire station.
Sure.
So all that infrastructure would have to be looked at.
Yeah, and that probably, the solution would be to separate that and let it continue,
Yeah,
to the main utilities, but separate from the fire station.
so just something to consider, as we're looking
Yep,
at this.
good point.
Yeah, there's a reason why we did that, though, and I can't remember.
What's up for the power?
No, but there was something to do with digging,
The-
maybe we
no.
didn't want to dig it up.
It was the generator and it was the power set, right? So because we were gonna put a police station there, we need to tap off the generator, we're gonna utilize the fire department, fire station's generator and transfer switch and everything like that.
Right.
For the police station down there?
So, anyways, okay, we don't wanna go too far down that
Sure.
right now, but.
But, no, excellent point, thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, switching over to the North Street, Route 16 parcel. Tremendous location, on a main road with a little bit of a retail already, complex being developed, and obviously just not that far from your town buildings, right here in the town hall, the library, et cetera. So it certainly creates the opportunity for kind of a second town center or an extension of the town center that you already have that could be enhanced by, sidewalks and other ways to make that connection. I think that the challenge, with this piece is to get clear town input on, what the town would like to see there. We're working a similar project for the town of Hanson right now, where they're looking to convert a middle school on 17 acres to potentially senior housing or a combination of housing, for the town. In this case, because of the Route 16 location, It certainly feels like it has a retail component to it. But again, we need input from the town or from a subcommittee, the town planning, the planning board, to figure out what you would want to consider. And then once we understand the type of development that the town would like to see, our recommendation would be to go out to it with a request for information from developers to understand their input to the potential development. So then when we go out for RFP, we actually have current market information, and we just don't go out with a kind of a one-sided RFP that the market can't figure out how to build it because we've put too many restrictions on it. And again, it's a bit of a two-way street. If we want development there, that's fine. How do we create that market development, and what are the best ways to do that, utilizing as many state aid and funds as possible, such as Mass Works to create related infrastructure. I make a note there on the next page that the Mass Works application period for 2020 is literally just starting out. So I'm not sure the timing and what you have to do. Sometimes towns will put in a request and maybe they miss it this year, but now they've lined it up for next year. So it's just something to consider.
I want to add another quick aside just for today to make a note. So just earlier today, obviously this is not in concrete, but I had a meeting with MassDOT about the future of that intersection.
Yes.
And it's planned for redesign to be funded in 2022 and completed by 2024. So that seems very close to the timeline that we are considering with something at that site. And so if we are going to be looking to basically look at projects about infrastructure, it's now, because we want to make sure we're not digging up the road in the future or something to that
And then
extent.
leveraging the Mass DOT and the Mass Works at the same time with a thoughtful project that the town would like to see developed there is absolutely the right approach.
So that's the time frame now. We have a nice window,
That's excellent.
right?
Oh, so we could start that process.
Correct. We're
Right now,
on the
yeah.
water inside right now, the water infrastructure side.
I would recommend we just do that.
We should bring our legislators in on that
100%.
discussion as well.
Yeah.
I think that's a great idea.
You know, in respect to the use of the property, I think it's kind of a chicken and egg approach on this, because we want to obviously leave it up to the taxpayers, town-owned land, and a very visible location, but we also want to be able to bring options to them. So what comes first? Because, you know, we could do a round table, and we could have a full house of citizens here throwing out 50 ideas.
Right, right.
Or we can go back and we can pitch some best use ideas and trying to maximize the return off of that property.
Right.
So, you know, my opinion would be, you know, to try to go out to RFI first and try to see what comes back. You know, if they do an RFI, they're gonna look at that, they're gonna understand the setbacks, they're gonna understand how much wetlands are on the property, what can be used, what can't be used, ingress, egress, stuff like that, so
Right.
they'll be able to figure it out pretty quickly. It's, you know, the topo on that's pretty steep, so, you know, how are we gonna build into it? Are they gonna be putting retaining walls and everything else to try to build that up?
Right, right. And Kim and I had talked that even prior to the RFI, it may make sense to hire a architect, space planner, to be doing some program and provide you guys, the selectmen and the town, a couple of options that would seem to make sense for the town, for the topography. And, you know, that's something that we talked about, so we certainly wanted your input on that, because now we can try to come up with two concepts that are mixed use, based on input, and now we have something to present to the town, versus just, you know, what do you guys, what's everybody want to do? And then you get 100 ideas, you know, many of them will probably be good, but.
Yeah, I do have a question out here.
Peter Marks, 51 Pleasant Street. I thought we had lead issues in that property, and we were gonna leave it idle, so we didn't disturb the property.
Not that I'm aware of, but I think that, in my opinion, anybody that's interested in that property would have to do their proper due diligence and, you know, face most steps.
15 years ago, and it's high lead, because that's where the afterwards was.
Yeah,
So I recall that, because we've been here a few times already, I think you and I have have even discussed this before, right?
Yes.
So, I know we did core samples, I can't remember, it's been so long, but I know we did core samples there, there was, I don't know if it was lead or whatever, I don't recall it actually being lead, but maybe whatever it was is also lead. And it was from the pesticides used at the apple orchard. Now, again, there was only at a certain depth, I believe they diminished, if I remember correctly. But again, that's an item that we're gonna have to, that a buyer will have to tend with. This, and again, along with the other same piece on the other side, I feel like we've gone both angles. I think we've even gone the angle of just somebody come in and offer us money for this land and sell it, and then figure out what you want to do with it after that. It's the same thing with Morrison Drive. Again, we've paid money already to do the conceptual drawings. I don't know where they went, but there was those cardboard copies we had for years that were
Downstairs.
there was this option, there was that option, there was housing, mixed use, so just don't know where do we want to go cost-wise when we get from.
Yeah, but let me just kind of make sure that I answer that question correctly and don't come off like I'm sounding crass. I don't know what the details are on it, but I know that since I've been on the board, we've kicked around doing something with the parcel, right? So if we can dig that information up, then we can dig it up and look at it. I've developed an awful lot of land in my life, and I know that if somebody's interested in it and they can find value in it and find a way to do it,
It wasn't a
then.
prohibitive factor in going out to bid on it
I don't think I
last time.
remember seeing that, so.
Right.
Did have to do some removal.
Yeah, without knowing the specifics, but I do think there is a value in an RFI, particularly in this market, to even know what
Yeah.
types of businesses are even interested. That's part of it. We have gotten calls over the years, we get, let's say, one a year about something
Yeah.
related. Usually they change their mind when they find out there's no water and sewer on the site and it's not shovel-ready, right? There's certainly interest to do something there,
Yeah.
but we need examples of as is right now without infrastructure, and then is the value that much more if we invest in infrastructure? We really need to get a sense, and not just sale, potential lease of the land and development on leased land. So there's a lot of different options.
Well, and if you want to apply for Mass Works, we need more information than what we have
Right.
as to interest on the parcel, because if you apply now and say, well, we want water and sewer, and they're
Right.
going to say, well, why?
For what?
This will
Right.
help us, right?
Is that helpful?
Yep.
Okay.
Can I make a suggestion?
Sure.
Leave it the way it is. You've been beating this horse for 20 years. Why spend more money?
Well, I think the question is, can you create revenue, from a development to help the
Of
town?
course you can, but what's it gonna cost?
Well-
People like to see the open. You wanna come to Mendon and see open, we're gonna put wood development all the way up the
Right,
road.
yeah, that's the question.
I think that the simple answer is we have limited commercial land, right? That is a big piece of commercial land that could potentially be commercial land, that could be good tax revenue for the town in our commercial district where we're keeping it limited. It's great. My
You
house
lived in
is
it.
I can't really say that I would want my view obstructed, but hopefully I won't be there much longer, but the revenue that could be generated from there, and there's always the argument of, do we want to be in the land business too, right? So you're talking about a land lease, but it could be very beneficial to the town to do a land lease to a commercial development, but not have to burden any of the cost on the town, because they would have to improve the land for themselves. Yes, there's this, and this is why we're here where we're at, because there's the side that we say we don't want to change much of what Mendon is, and then there's the other side that said we're looking at a $2 million override, and the problem is our taxes are on us because we have limited commercial development. So that's where I think that's one of the main reasons we're looking at all of these pieces.
Double-edged sword. All right. Okay.
Great, thank you.
Oh, sorry.
And then as we look at the last parcel, which is the remaining 10 acres of the basically 27 acres that is part of the solar farm, this is the piece that's literally on Route 16, across from the drive-in, next to Muddy Brook. Again, this is all ledge. There is no sewer, there is no water. A couple of discussions could be to expand the solar field. Now, that would get it visually right on Route 16, that would be a negative. Number two, you know, if sewer or water ever did come down Milford Route 16, now you could pretty much put anything there. Whether it be retail, whether it be 100+ units on 10 acres. And then the other thing, as was talked about in the past, open space, parking next to conservation land, to be able to be utilized Muddy Brook and that, you know, conservation land that runs along Muddy Brook. So you've got some combinations there. Also, obviously, we're just down the hill from the 21 acres that we're talking about. So they are subdivided by Muddy Brook, but yet for parking or something else that could potentially support what might happen there, it's something that would appear to maybe hold on that until a better decision is made on the 21 acres. But again, that's up to you guys.
Okay. Again, maybe just tie that into the RFI.
Yeah. There's a lot of factors, so.
Okay. Okay. Anything else?
So I would just say, so my target right now, I'm specifically interested right now at Morrison Drive and potentially figuring out next steps on that, if, you know, either for sale or not. I want to put a placeholder on the warrant for something potentially related to Morrison Drive, just in case something came together, either permission to sell or permission to just basically see where we go with that. I mean, we can table it as we get closer, but just so you know.
And that's for the town meeting this spring?
Right, for May. I mean, I think starting there is the easiest, obviously, because we need the revenue, and that's related to the police station so directly that it's, you know, we could explain why there's a value in sort of looking at each of these projects at town meetings, so we kind of get used to doing that process, and hopefully people will start to understand that we do have assets sitting that are not liquefied.
I mean, obviously, we're looking for opportunities for revenue. It may be a little bit too aggressive to try to get something on Maze, because we haven't looked at our town infrastructure yet either, to really determine if we want to reuse that building or not. So it doesn't give us a lot of time to do that exercise, talk with the CapEx, I mean, we can talk about it if we have enough time, if you feel that we have enough time
But we'll
to
see
do
if
that.
something
but-
actually materializes for it.
Yeah.
If we have to go to town meeting no matter what to decide if we want to sell or do
That's right.
anything related to it. And I
Right.
think there's, you know, the townspeople will want to have a say about a thing, and so the sooner we start that conversation,
Yeah.
the better. So we'll just
Yeah.
see how it comes together in the next month or so.
One comment that was made was, obviously talking to council and seeing what our options are on the type of RFP that we would have to stick out there, so.
Yeah, I'm pretty certain we would still have to do a full, just to get the true value. Otherwise, let's assume we decide not to sell it, even through the RFP process, and to repurpose it for another town project, we would need to know what a true value actually is. I mean, the value that has frequently been discussed is like $1 million, but it's, in actuality, it's closer to $300-something thousand.
Right.
And those are important numbers to be able to explain to people when we're talking about reuse of the facility for a town purpose. And so I think a true RFP might be helpful. We'll see.
Okay.
Great. That's it,
it.
thanks.
Good, thank you.
Thank you so much.
No problem.
Great, thank you.
I just want to, am I next? I just want to talk to you 1 second before you go. Offline.
Do you,
I'm good.
okay.
I just want to catch him before he leaves.
All right, so we're going to consider the farm tax ballot question.
This would be for the removal of the excise tax from Mass General Law, Chapter 59, Section 8A, Right now, we charge this tax. I believe the median over the last 10 years was $1,400 a year that we were making on it. It's for an excise tax for agricultural folks who own farm machinery and equipment or farm animals. And, it's really not a necessary item.
Yeah, we've kicked this around a couple of times, I believe, so, I mean, I have no problem.
We talked about this before, but the mechanism was not available at the time.
Oh, okay.
So we had to wait for the next
That's right.
meeting, or the next ballot vote, so.
I have
I'll
no,
just make the motion if that works.
yep,
I move that the BOS hereby votes to seek voter approval at the next regular town election to be held May 12, 2020, not to impose the excise tax established by General Law, Chapter 59, Section 8A, by instructing the town clerk to include on the ballot for said election the following question. Do you approve, double negative, do you approve not imposing the excise tax established by Mass General Law, Chapter 59, Section 8A, on any person engaged principally in agricultural who owns farm machinery and equipment or farm animals?
Second.
any further discussion on that? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Although I don't love the wording.
Yeah, the wording is really,
It's legalese.
yeah, that's just like,
But it is the proper way, I suppose, but maybe we can,
So, just to confirm, a yes vote would mean that the tax is not being imposed.
absolutely.
that's the way that I,
Yeah, so
Read
maybe
it.
we could, maybe in the crier when that goes out, and if you're gonna write an article about it, we can make that clear. for
make it
everyone.
clear, yeah. Of not imposing. And then, so let's consider the language for the ballot.
Yep, I move to authorize, oh, sorry, is that what this next
Yep,
motion is?
yep.
Yeah, I move to authorize the following farm tax ballot language. Do you approve not imposing the excise tax established by General Law, Chapter 59, Section 8A, on any persons engaged principally in agricultural who owns farm machinery and equipment or farm animals?
Second.
Any further discussion on that?
No.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. All right, we'll get that on the ballot and on the warrant. Let's see, discuss appointment process for the fire department personnel. Chief?
Hi again. This is just a follow-up to, I don't know if it was last meeting or 2 meetings ago, where we spoke briefly about whether the board would entertain delegating their appointment authority to either myself and/or the town administrator for per diem and on-call personnel. It just came up, I was reminded last week when one of our on-call people who covers 3 to 5 shifts, stipended overnight shifts per week, came to me and said that he's got a contract job out of state for at least 2 months, which just left a big hole. So we've sped up the process of changing over that stipend overnight process to the way I had budgeted for an hourly pay, and getting per diem people to start filling it. Last week I got 4 more applications, 3 from paramedics, 1 from a basic, looking for per diem work here. I wasn't able to get them through the process in time for the posting for this agenda. They were done, background checks were done over the weekend by Sergeant Blanchett, and the preliminary review was they were all good. He's just doing the final touches on them, but he doesn't see a problem with them. So we're literally working on trying to fill shifts for next week to make sure we have ambulance coverage, and while typically when things settle down, I don't think that we would need to have that delegation. I think we could still bring people to the board, but until things settle down, which could be a few months, I was just checking to see, make it a little bit easier, and it's purely selfish on my point to make it a little easier to get per diem people into filling shifts quicker. As a quick aside, and not that this is a motivating factor, but I know the board would appreciate hearing that last week the overtime was actually 0 for the week. So we've been able to bring in 4 or 5 per diem people. That is also helped by the 2 career people that we do have working right now really don't like to work a lot of overtime. But, and that's important to say because a lot of the per diem people are coming from other career departments and they don't want to be in a position of going against the union here. So, so far, everybody's been very positive on that approach.
You know, Chief, what I said to you when you first came here, and this still holds true today, is, you know, we, or at least myself, I obviously trust your judgment, and I'm sure my colleagues would share the same sentiment. We trust your judgment on the personnel that you want to hire. And, you know, you've proven yourself by, you know, doing some really good hires since you've been here, and you've been working really hard to rebuild our fire department, and in my opinion, you're doing an exceptional job with it. So a lot of times when you're coming in front of us for on-call appointments, you know, in my opinion, I'm trusting your judgment, and obviously we know that you're looking at the best interests of the community when you do that, and you know, with a lot of goals in mind, not only just cutting down the overtime. So
It's providing the service.
it's providing the service, exactly. So, in my opinion, I personally would not have a problem with this. You know, having Kim and yourself being able to do the on-call appointments, and, you know, you being able to continue and provide that service without getting wrapped up in the red tape of needing to come in front of the board for those appointments. Obviously, the full-time appointments, you know, I would expect that this board would be
Yes.
always engaged in those pieces. So, would you guys agree?
So, just to be clear, it's just going through Kim, right? Is that the process or is it just you?
Whatever the board is, whether it's just me or it's Kim being the final sign-off as a delegate for the board.
Yeah, I think a delegate for the board, just because of the way we've always traditionally done stuff in the
I'm
past.
comfortable with this.
Would you agree?
Yeah, I think, I just, as opposed to the meeting, it's just
Right.
check in with Kim.
Yeah, it's just,
and
yeah, it's just another check, yeah.
Yeah.
Do anyway. So it basically, we're already performing the process, and then the additional
That's
step
right.
is getting to the board to do the final vote, the actual formal vote. So for these, this is kind of, because they're also often situational. It needs to be done in a fashion that's more than every 2 weeks, so.
Yeah. You know, I think we should, you know, just kind of close the loop on it. If you guys don't have a problem, we'll just take a motion on that to say that we're,
So, okay, just explain it to me one time, because I heard a few things. So, we're going to allow the fire chief to appoint part-time,
On call, what do you call it?
And actually, it would be, I think
It's
ultimately,
town
town administrator. You'd be delegating your authority to the town administrator to appoint on-call and per diem fire personnel, or personnel for the fire department.
and you're gonna notify us when these appointments take place via email, or are we now going to still bless them at a meeting, or?
no,
No.
we wouldn't have to.
We will let you know.
Okay, I move to appoint, as an appointment, I mean, I move.
Authorize.
I move to authorize the town administrator to approve on-call and per diem fire department personnel. When
Period.
requested by the chief. I guess.
Second.
Any further discussion on that?
No.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, we get another chief that gets to come up to discuss some dispatch.
So 2 chiefs.
Oh, we got 2 chiefs coming up, all right.
So Chief Kessler and I, for the past year or so, since he's come on board, we've been working on a grant that I received in FY 2017, which was to upgrade the fire department in Millville and both Mendon to get a 1 frequency. So through this process, we've been having several monthly meetings, different contractors we've been going to and meeting with the state because there's additional needs we have. During one of these conversations, when they talked about upgrading the fire radio equipment and additionally moving our dispatch over to the new fire station, Obviously, costs came involved, that they're going to spend a great deal of money to do this. They had mentioned us, like they did previous when I became chief in 2016, will we ever be interested in either having someone come to us or joining a bigger regionalization? At the time, we both said, if you present something to us, we will bring it to the administrator and the board, and they can take a look at it. So we said, obviously, we're always open to it. Currently, they give us, 100 and something thousand every year to run our dispatch. So that was Frank Posniak, the director of State 911. He runs everything. So with that was maybe back in November, October, somewhere around there. He ran with it, and he's currently looking at Metacomet as an option for us maybe to be part of. We have explored for years more departments coming here. Worcester County regionalization just doesn't seem to isn't happening as quickly as it is in other part of the states. We're at a point just where we figure we'd let you know that much of it. The state's going back and forth with Metacomet to see if some type of deal could be presented to you to evaluate and see if you even have interest into it. Chief Landry has also been involved with it, and he went to see his board about a month ago and gave them an update. So I wanted to make sure that if it's out there now, you guys know what's going on right now. I don't really have anything solid to give you. Anything that he spoke on his meeting was just preliminary stuff that they had mentioned. So it's really nothing concrete, and I'd hate to put anything out there that can't be stamped down as a definite, because then it's just rumors are going to spread and people are going to think things are going where they're not going. So they are meeting tomorrow to discuss it more, and then they're meeting next week on the 11th with an official meeting with Metacomet to see if they would be even interested in taking on additional towns. It'd be a package deal. It'd be Mendon and Millville. And again, this came up with Frank Posniak also because we're a year away from renegotiating our regional dispatch with Millville, who is in dire straits with finances, and we don't know how that will turn out. So we obviously have to do due diligence and look at it. There's several reasons we would look at it. The chief and I discussed it, and we present to you as one, it's a service level. What are we going to get for a service level? Are we getting a better service or worse service? Where is our service level if we agree to look at this, or you guys want to look at it? And then secondly, what would the cost be involved? So those are the two criteria we gave that we know you would need, so we could give it to you, and then you guys can evaluate and decide if it's something you want to look at, or you just want to put it to the side and say, we're fine the way we are. Continue everything you were doing, with the state. So.
What towns are involved with that?
So Metacomet, it's probably one of the most professional ones I've seen, Chief. I don't know if you could say.
Amazing the setup.
It is something that was about 10 years in the works, and they slowly put it together. It's the way regional should truly be done. It's run by a board. There's 27 employees, and it's an individual agency that is run, and each town administrator is on the board to decide how decisions are made with it. It is currently now consists of Norfolk, Rentham, Franklin, and Plainville. So all communities that are either much larger than us or similar in size. And at one time, they usually have 6 dispatchers working, so to cover all of that.
Plus a dispatch supervisor.
Correct.
7.
Yeah, so, but again, we knew this when we became one of the first regionals. The most efficient way to provide a better service to your communities is to get more towns involved. Because not only does it break down on your costs, it gives you more personnel to provide that service. So you're stacked for a peak emergency all the time. Dispatch has really become difficult, I'd say, the past 5 years with EMD. EMD is Emergency Medical Dispatch, which entails now that they have to get special training, get requalified in it yearly, and on top of it, once you pick up that 911 call, you cannot hang it up until a first responder gets there. So it makes it very tough for any dispatcher working alone to manage that call and also get the resources out and communicate with the resources there.
And if a second call comes in, that's the breaking point for them. I mean, it's very hard to do just a single call, but with a single dispatcher, a second call is breaking. I went back just looking at some of our radio interactions with dispatch over the years, and I listened to a couple of fires, including the North Ave fire 2 years ago now. That dispatcher, and I give him a lot of credit, he was very professional through the whole thing, was trying to get additional resources for the fire while they were doing putting out a Bolo for Millville for a vehicle involved in a domestic, taking a call from Franklin Police regarding that Bolo, and then getting a call to run a license from an officer, all within probably about a 2-minute time frame. And again, trying to get fire resources up to help up the street.
So we just want to make sure that you were updated, you know where we are, and if you had any questions, you could ask us now, and then we'll keep you updated as we go.
I mean, without having all the information in front of me, I don't think I'd be able to ask a bunch of questions. You and I have spoken about this type of stuff a bunch, Chief, in the past, and you know my opinion is, number one, it's service, right? Making sure that our community's safe. That comes first and foremost. The second piece was the management of it. How do things get managed? Third piece is the legalities of it, if we were to choose to go in this direction, and the financial impacts, right? And I kind of tie those together. If something didn't work, what would that look like for the community if we had to reinvest back into our community to get something back up and going? The cost, in my opinion, is really big. We're, in a tough budget year, and I don't see it improving, unless we decide to go out and start doing overrides and stuff like that, which I'm not sure if our taxpayers have that tenacity at that point to take on another tax override. So I would say that, if there's benefits, and we can get, in my opinion, we can get a lot out of it, and reduce some of that pressure on your staff, then I would have no problem with looking at something like that. Mark, any thoughts on that?
I'm very open to the idea.
Yeah, just because of the technology side of it, I'm kind of already in the mix on it. So yeah, again, I've always been regionalize whatever we can. But we've talked about DPWs before, we've talked about fire department before, we've
Talked about parks since I've been here.
Yeah, I mean, so, yeah.
New England's a weird state where we don't utilize
Libraries, we
regionalization.
talked about
The way I look at it, for us small communities, in my opinion, we have no choice but to start to be creative and nimble. If we're not, our tax rate's gonna go through the roof. All right, so we just sat here and we had a big discussion on 3 town-owned
You must have a high
properties.
roof.
3 town-owned properties that we have that we don't even know if we can sell. We have X amount of commercial land left in the town, and we don't even know how much we can build on it, or even what the best use is, right? Which I think is one of our major goals that we need to achieve, is figure out how much actual commercial property we have in town and what we can do with it. We don't have huge infrastructure in this town. We don't have water, we don't have sewer.
Right.
Any infrastructure.
Any infrastructure. We have solar. Power lines. If we don't start being creative, this town will become unaffordable quickly. It will be $20 a thousand in a blink of an eye.
Right. I'm just going to put my soapbox pitch in the same vein, which is, it's not just in times like this where it's tough, which it is very tough. It's going to be tough, but we do have a responsibility to make sure we are providing a certain level of service and making sure that it's the most efficient way and the most cost-effective, in every situation. Doesn't necessarily mean we're going to change, but we have to look at these things in order to basically stay, relevant and actually, municipal government, much like any other industry, has changed significantly over time, and there are ways in which we can modernize in order to provide the service and not, have those overhead costs that we've had for generations, so.
Personally, I think it would be irresponsible not to look at it.
Correct.
So that's where we are right now. The chief and I have talked relentlessly about our number one priority, obviously, is service level. So we're going to bring those thoughts back to you when we get something. And then the financial part that's your job.
Okay.
Excellent, great.
All right.
Speaking of things.
Thanks for the update, thanks for looking into it.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chief.
All right, Town Hall well.
Speaking of things that need money.
It's not well? The Town Hall well is not well?
So without having, so I'll start at the end point. I want to put an article on the warrant asking for funding for either probably replacement of the well for the town hall campus. I don't have a dollar figure at this point of what that is, but I'm estimating somewhere between the $50,000 to $100,000 range.
That's great.
As you know, we have had the well fail a couple of times, either through pump failure or some other problem during the last year or so. And I think in addition to looking at costs for repairs, which we will look at certainly, we absolutely have to look at what the full replacement cost is for the well. Just
It's a lot of money for a well.
it is, so I'm just basically giving you the heads up. We've had a couple of companies come and take a look at it now. Only 1 out of 3 says that the well could even potentially be repaired that we have right now. As you know, without the well is actually built underneath the building, so there are some accessibility issues about getting to the well, and then...
Is it right in the middle of the police?
No, it's right here.
It's directly under the new addition that was built in the 80s.
So-
They built it over the, well,
So, yeah, so the pipe is steel pipe. So when they tried to pull it out, it wouldn't budge. So now I was working, I was talking with Broder Welds and Pumps together, was trying to help get it out. They used to come along. He also has a crane on the side of his truck that will come through. The concern was that if it snapped off the back, it would, damage the building, and he was concerned that he didn't want that liability.
or if it snaps and ruins the actual
Right,
water
we
to
talked
the
about-
site. I mean,
We talked about bringing in Chet's Welding's crane that would be a little bit more stable and a little bit stronger, but now if the pipe breaks, well, shut it all down, because we have no water.
right, we can't operate,
Break the
we have to
pipe
provide.
While we're trying to pull it out, we can't pump water up. So then it was, now, okay, do we go build a new well or dig a new well? But now there's all these crazy regulations you gotta go through to
Right.
permitting, and now it can't be next to this building, it can't
Right.
be next to that building, this postage stamp lot. We gotta try to go either take people's lands or get them to give it to us and prove that we at least tried before they'll say, okay, put it over here like you would do on your regular
Right.
residential lot, and with probably the same amount of people who would actually be drinking the water, which is probably nobody. They're just gonna be using the bathroom and washing their hands with it, right? So, I mean, we
But-
get into this, sorry, I'm getting a little off, because I'm starting to lose my mind about it.
But,
It's so ridiculous.
Tell me how you feel.
yeah, the point is, though, the well is functioning right now, and that's great. But we can't guarantee how long, and we definitely need to look at, even if we get someone in here to come and tell us that the well is gonna last for 5 more years, we have a problem that's coming, and so we really need to get an estimate and a location and all of that to be prepared for when that comes. And, we only have, $250,000 in CapEx, so we're gonna talk about that in a minute. But if we're talking about town priorities, I'm just gonna jump to the top of the list with this one, so.
Well, it may be smart to actually start permitting process for an alternative.
Assuming it's, the ideal location is
agree,
actually on a site that we can
Get on the phone with
access.
DEP and say, look, this is gonna be an emergency situation.
Mike?
Is the issue with pulling the pump, or is the issue with the shaft of the well itself? And how deep is the well, does anybody know?
It's like Jeopardy.
I think they gave us an estimate of, don't hold me to it, 400 feet. And it was the fact that it wouldn't, when they were using the come-along, so in the elevator area where it is, they could cut a hole in the top, open it up and put a come-along up on top, and it couldn't budge pulling the pump out. It didn't budge it like an inch. It started to actually buckle things down. So, again, then the whole crane situation came into play, but you have to get it, you have to take a window out to get it into the shaft to then pull it out. And again, if it busts the pipe, now we got nothing.
It's weird that the pump is seized in there though like that. Because
Well, I guess it's not abnormal with, and I don't know wells as good as maybe some others do, but I guess it's not that abnormal with a steel shaft pipe.
Well, I gotta believe if it's right out here and it's down 400 feet, it's gonna be through a ledge shaft, because that set scheme that we put in the ground over there, it was ledged down, it's 8 or 9 feet. So,
I mean, I don't know, you can talk to Broder. That's what was,
I would presume it's a ledge shaft going through the granite. And you get down to 400 feet.
Yeah.
So over time, silt comes in and settles around.
Yeah, settles on top of it, yeah. I would say this, I actually, I kind of like where Mark's going with this. I think that we should start permitting regardless for something with the DEP, right? I think we need to get in front of it. I think the other question is, where do we land financially? And if we had an emergency, how can we get the cash real quick? If we choose not, if this doesn't pass in town meeting, because somebody says you can get 2 or 3 more years out of this or whatever, right? And then the thing dies, then you're gonna have to come up with an emergency repair
Well,
anyways.
We're definitely gonna need some exploratory funds
Yeah.
at town
Yeah.
meeting to get real hard numbers on this to know.
Yeah.
And we should start with DEP. I mean, that's as terrible as it is, but I mean, part of the issue at this point is really being able to know, to Mike's point, where the best location would even be for a future well on this site if it can exist, or if it's really off-site.
Well, an
and that's
engineer's
a
gonna tell us
whole-
that.
Well, if they can't find one here,
No, but an engineer is gonna tell us the best place to put it based off of code, right? And then at that point,
DEP involved with that.
and DEP is gonna be involved with that process.
Right.
Because the engineer's gonna design the plan, and then that plan's gonna be submitted to DEP for approval,
right,
right?
we're gonna need a site
So
out too.
all that stuff is gonna have to kinda go through the process.
yeah, right, but it's not doable on this piece of property.
Right,
No, I know.
that's the problem.
Based on DEP's current guidelines. So I think, again, the situation, okay, and this is all hearsay that we've heard, that DEP is gonna do this, DEP is gonna do that, but nobody's called yet. So I think we need to call DEP and say, hey, we got a problem here. We have a postage stamp lot and no place to put this.
Right.
What are we gonna do?
Right.
Do we just,
And
can we
they
put it
may
in the back
have a
corner?
good, they may have a good solution.
Yeah, right. They may just say, yes, you have an emergency situation, put it in the back corner as far away from everything as you
Maybe
can.
they're gonna say, give us a call when it stops working entirely.
Which I don't understand. I mean, there's no septic on this lot or anything like that. I mean, all the septic
It's
is
a
done.
holding tank, right? It's just a holding tank, right? Because it leaches down with the
It'll be
rest of it.
75 feet away from it.
Well, let's
What,
find
on a
out all
commercial?
of that.
I think so.
Let's find out all of those
All right, all
answers
right.
to all of that.
Start there and we'll talk
But
about it.
because we've all talked about it individually, sort of, and never in a public meeting,
Yeah.
we're now talking in a public meeting,
Okay,
so people
Call
are
DEP.
aware.
go DB. All right, moving on. Talk to us about the budget, Kim.
I
This
would
is gonna be
love to
fun.
talk to you about the budget very quickly.
We have no money. That was
So-
quick.
Very quickly.
Just a blank sheet.
And then here's copies of the budget. Currently, I'm gonna do a very quick once-over since we haven't had a public meeting yet. I apologize for those of you who have heard me do this a couple of times already this season. So I'm just gonna hit the highlights, because it's easier. So in general, you know,
Keep on going, Kim.
he sees it in his nightmares. So,
Go ahead, just keep on going.
okay, so the town's budget is proposed right now to be up about 3.5%. That includes the school's budget. As of right now, we are only funding, we've only recommended to fund $250,000 towards the school's request for funding. Their request for funding is $2.8 million. Obviously, that is not in this budget. So we're going to focus on the town's operating budget and talk a little bit about.
2.8 million between both towns.
Right, but I'm just
still.
going to focus on the numbers I can handle within Mendon. So, a couple of things. So, as usual for the budget process, I've met with all of the departments, I had them submit their their potential budgets with requests in them. Their budget requests were just under $400,000, about $366,000. Our revenues decreased this past year, and then we obviously had budget drivers, as any budget does, and so our retirement went up $53,000, health insurance went up $42,000, Medicare is $10,000. Contracts, basically for employees, is another $130,000. The new ambulance payment is coming online, that's $42,000. I know I'm talking fast, but we have an election this year that costs an additional amount, and we have increases in a trash contract. What I want to highlight with saying all of those things is, these are the things we had to put in the budget, okay? That's $315,000. Our in total budget increase, right, is $339,000, our total for the town's operations. So that's, what, $20,000 in total increases, which obviously is a small amount of money in a budget that's $8 million. So the board obviously has the prerogative to decide what gets funded and what does not get funded in the town's budget, okay? These are the lists of the requests that were given by departments. There was a police overtime request for $50,000, which I cut to 37. There was an additional request for an officer. There's a request for a fire on-call deputy. There's a request for an additional 5 hours for facilities parks maintenance. There's an additional part-time, this is additional hours at the library, the additional benefits for the 4 FTEs that were requested, there's funding in there for a position for the Board of Health, and we can talk a little bit about that going forward. The request for social media to start being more transparent was in the budget. Historical Commission has a request in there. Highway has an overtime request, hired equipment increase, a part-time assistant at the Council of Aging, and then a road materials request. So I have cut everything from that list, which is $366,000 worth of requests from this budget, and have only funded at this point $37,000 for police overtime, $6,000 for the on-call deputy, $6,600 for the Board of Health for a possible health inspector position, hourly paid, a replacement of a stipend position that currently exists, a $3,500 request from the Historical Commission, and that is all. So that's $53,000. And as of right now, our budget is $18,000. Sorry, I'm so school. $18,000 in the negative. We have a couple of outstanding issues just to touch on that still have to be resolved. I haven't received BVT's numbers yet. So right now I've got a 5% estimate in there for what theirs could potentially be, but they've been pretty good the last couple of years because our enrollment numbers are down. So my guess is that's a safe number. Obviously, the MERSDA request is not included. In previous years, we've had this 50-50 policy. 50-50 this fiscal year is $303,000. We've only budgeted at $250,000, so we haven't even hit the 50-50 level funding number that we have given them in the past. We don't have it. If you want to put a level funding number in like we did in 2015, we're going to have to make some cuts somewhere in the operating budget to get there.
Are we over minimum contribution?
Yes.
Yeah, by a lot.
By a lot. And the only other issue that's working out, which hasn't been resolved yet, is there's an issue with the trash contract and the revenue there. The revenue is down, and that number is probably correct. It's probably been down for a couple of years, but we're high on the expenditure side. The contracts seem to be higher. Right now, there's a $35,000 deficit between the two, which used to be level. And obviously, if we can bridge that gap somewhere, our budget will be balanced, and that's what I'm hoping to do.
Do we know why?
I'm working on finding.
It's just a discrepancy, or there's a problem?
So we don't know yet, and so I've been trying to work on it for the last couple of weeks. It's a little bit tricky. Over the last couple, we certainly had a surplus for a couple of years, but it wasn't because we had an excess on the revenue side. What was actually happening is we were over budgeting on the expenditure side. So we've been bringing in a pretty steady amount of revenue, but we've been budgeting high. And so there's been excess money left over in the lines at the end of the year, and so basically this surplus on this side has sort of made it look like we've been flat all these years. And compounded with the fact that midway through the last couple of years, we switched to a new trash contractor, and so some of the payment timing is off. So some years it looks like revenue is down, the next year it looks like it up. The timing, we haven't lined up the timing yet with the payments. If you actually looked at year-to-date right now specifically, their revenue and expenditures are tracking pretty close to each other. I mean, but the budget for next year is about $45,000 higher than what is projected for this year on the expenditure side. So we need to take a look at that contract and make sure the numbers that we're using to figure out what we should be budgeting are correct, and all of that still has to happen. So I don't necessarily think if it's true and we are contractually obligated to those numbers on that side, obviously we need to have a longer discussion about what that means on the revenue side. Obviously, we can't have the town subsidizing trash rates, but that's a further conversation. I think it's more of at this point, I think it might just be a question about leveling things on the expenditure side. I think that might get us there. I think we are too much space on that side and not enough on the other.
How is it that in this economy, we're down in permits, meals
Okay,
tax, we have new restaurants? I mean, I don't
So
get.
I brought the revenues to talk about briefly. The assessor has been to a couple of meetings, and we did change this date, so I'm sure she would be happy to be here to go into a bit more detail.
Need another,
One of the things I can tell you is, and she will tell you, and you know, because you've all been on this board long enough, we are very conservative on the revenue side. We always have been, because the thought is, well, if we're under, it rolls to free cash, right? But when you're in a budget year like this, and everything is down to the $5,000, $10,000, we are very tight in looking at everything. We have been down. If you take, I have an analysis, all of the local receipts, basically, just for anyone who's paying attention at home. We only bring in about $2 million in change in local receipts. That's not very much. So, some things look, $50,000 seems like a big fluctuation, but in our budget, everything we derive is from state aid or tax dollars. So we have very little sources for additional revenue. And so some of these numbers are down, and it's challenging. I mean, we go through, we look at each one of them, and we make sure, like, we'll use the ambulance revenue as an example. The board just recently voted for a rate increase, and so we can safely predict that we're gonna come in higher than the actuals from a previous year. But basically, the assessor submits numbers that she feels comfortable with for the town. I don't have much, now, over the years, there's been a lot of discrepancy, for one reason or another. Things vary. I do think we have to be very cautious in this economy. But my guess would be, if I was predicting, that we're going to see a big surplus in a future fiscal year. I certainly don't want to see us making cuts unnecessarily if we're being too conservative on revenue. But like I said, my biggest issue on the revenue side right now, without knowing, meals tax is down, permits are down, it's one of the other things, little strange nuances, I will remind you, is that the data that we used for the FY21 budget to set, as you can see, is it's based on FY19 actual data. So if you actually think about a timeline, that's like an 18-month gap between what was happening then and what we are agreeing will happen now. There's a lot of room in there, but
But to say that they're down, it's just down from the previous year.
Well, she's forecasting it down, right?
Right.
So if you really think about it, it's.
We'd have a huge project or something that year that drove it up.
right, it could be.
Yeah, obviously, there's, on the revenues list, there's revenues that we can definitely count on, that, I could say that they're pretty accurately reflected. And then there's revenues in here that are forecasts that the approach has always been to be a little bit more conservative, because we don't know, and then you get halfway through a fiscal year and you find out when you do
Right.
an audit of how we're doing, and now you're in a big pickle, and you're laying somebody off because we don't have enough money in the budget
Right.
to be able to carry.
Right.
So now it becomes, do you become conservative, or do you lighten up a little bit on your forecast and put a little bit more money in there, and then, kick the can down the road on when you start laying somebody off? I mean, it's just two different ways to look at it.
Right.
Right? You know what I'm saying? So,
I mean, I missed the tax classification hearing, so I don't know. I can't speak to why new growth would be flat.
Yeah.
That's something that we need the assessors to speak to.
yeah.
Where is the solar pilot revenue captured in this? Do you know?
Well, we used to recognize it, this is a trick question. So we used to recognize it in reoccurring, and then we were required to recognize it as tax revenue. So it got moved from local receipts into taxes.
Okay.
But, I mean, again, I know we don't have that many revenue sources, so it's not that.
Has the assessor said how conservative she's being on this?
Nope, I think she's just following the practice that she has, which is they use the previous year's actuals, and then because she has to submit a letter, basically plus or minus if the numbers come in otherwise, and basically justify why you would change it. So like, for instance, let's use trash as an example, because that's a wild card, right? So in the past, we budget on the revenue side exactly what we budget for on the expenditure side.
Sure.
But that's not what's come in the last couple of years. So 398 was the actual from FY '18, right? And then what happens with the billing and what we talked about for FY '19, this looks like we brought in $520,000. So if you were to just, you brought in 520, let's estimate 520. That's not the case. If you look a little bit further, you'll see it really is consistently right around that $400,000 mark. And so, we've been over budgeting.
Yeah, but if you sit there and you actually look at her forecast, right, for the 2020 budget, for the FY '20 budget, I mean, she's only off, not even $100,000. Do you see what I'm saying? If you look at at her FY '20 budgeted versus actuals,
Yes.
you know what I mean? It's really, it's pretty darn close. It's not like,
Well, right, in some years, when we're being conservative, it's very specific, but then when a boom year comes, and when you're talking about such a small amount of money, any switch looks like a big switch, but unfortunately, it's only $2 million, and that's not a lot of money. So, we're down, so it seems like a big number to say, well, we're down 3% in revenues, but that's $75,000. Right? So now, to us, $75,000 makes a big difference in our budget, right? But when you're trying to bridge the gap between budgeting $250 and needing $1.28, $75,000.
but how much of a percentage is in her forecast? I don't know what percentages she's using in her algorithm, right? But let me just finish. If we gotta make up $18,000, is there a way to make up $18,000 in her forecast that she's comfortable with? We bridge the gap, we balance the budget. Do you see what I'm saying?
Correct, and I think that's possible.
Yeah.
We just would have to be able to justify the increase, and in the past, we haven't really done that. I would think it makes much more sense realistically to try to adjust down on the expenditure side for that particular issue with trash. Because if there really is a deficit on the revenue side, we're talking about something else that we need to talk to the Board of Health about. So.
Well, we're already not meeting the requests of the school, so if we reduce their line by 18,000 to meet our needs,
Well,
what's the difference?
I'm sorry for laughing. It's just how you said it.
Well, we're not funding their request at this point.
No.
We're not funding the.
No, but we're using some logic to how we're funding them,
Right.
so.
I budgeted for them what I thought we could actually afford and not compromise services to a level. After this point, if we have to go back and even find another $250 for the school, we are cutting services. There's nothing else to cut. That's personnel or hours of operation or department services. There's nothing. So this is the best budget that I feel like I can put forward until we know what the school is going to do. Obviously, if the override fails and they want to come back and try to recertify at a higher number, that's higher than the 250, then, well,
It's just one town.
right, we're gonna have some serious discussions, because this list of potential ads is gonna be,
We'll cross that bridge when we get there, in my
Correct.
opinion. You know, so,
so just wait until then. That's
yeah,
how
I mean, I think the analysis is great, Kim, what you did. I'm impressed that we got it down to 18,000. I mean, that doesn't come without a lot of heavy lifting.
Not happily. I 100% believe that all of those things should be in the budget, particularly in regard to roads.
Listen, just so you know, our roads infrastructure, for anybody who's listening, right? So we did a big study 4 years ago. And if we weren't investing, I forget the number, but it was almost like 500 grand a year.
I know it by heart, if you want me to say. So
Yeah.
the study says that right now we are maintaining our roads at an 80% ratio, which means in order to maintain them at 80% per year, you're supposed to be contributing $600,000.
$600,000.
Okay?
Yeah, I knew it was
In order
close.
to get to improve our roads, and we have to get to $1 million a year. For comparison, we currently budget $375,000 a year, actually, for the town of Mendon towards roads, and 275 of that is from the state. It's Chapter 90 money. So the town is actually only contributing $100,000 towards this $1 million problem. And if we don't get closer to the 600,000 number, what's going to happen is road failure completely, which we don't have capital to fix. So just
We're Mendon. We like dirt roads.
Yes, Alan will be, well, let's just say, so the FinCom continues to meet with the departments on Wednesdays for more detail in the budget. Mike can tell you more about that. And Alan will be talking about his budget particularly this week. So if anyone is really interested in the highway budget and issues there, they'll be meeting tomorrow, and it will obviously be televised. They can watch it then.
You know, this is my opinion on this, Kim. We have worked tremendously hard for the last 5 years of rebuilding this community that was decimated back in, well, decimated isn't the right word, but we cut a lot of services 8 years ago or 7 years ago, whatever it is, and we spent a lot of time deferring. And the last 5 years, we got it to a really good service level.
Right.
And to see it just go right back to the way it was would be really tough for this community, in my opinion.
Right, and I just want to add one more plug, because I don't get to talk about the budget that much, and we spend so much time of it and internally. Speaking of building towards the budget, because this gets talked about with percentages, the town's budget in general has only, from '08 until '21, has only grown in two areas: public safety and benefits.
Really needed, yep.
General
Benefits you can't
government,
control.
parks, culture, library, public works, all of those things are flat, the same exact rate they were in FY '08. So when we're talking about
What's included in public safety? DPW, fire, and highway, or just fire? and-
fire, highway, dispatch, and inspectional services.
And PD.
Yes.
I thought-
Police, fire, dispatch, and then inspectional services, all right? But everything else, I mean,
Public Works is almost lower.
correct, some of these budgets have
Yeah,
been
that's
cut.
okay.
So as a compare, because this came up last week at a meeting, just as an example, the general government budget in FY '08, general government, town hall services, was $1.2 million in '08. It's $1.2 million for FY '21. And that's with us subsidizing cost of living increases, making things more efficient. I mean, that is what we're doing on our side of the budget to try to just maintain what we have. So,
Yeah. What about the school?
the school's budget has increased $5 million during the same time period. They would say that they have both grown at the same rate, which is 40% during that time period, which is incorrect. Our budget may have grown at 40% in benefits and public safety, but we have no control over benefits, if you think about that. And a 40% increase in our budget when it's $8 million is, you know, $200,000. It's not $2 million. So 40% here is not the same as 40% is down the street. And it's not through the addition of personnel besides in replenishing positions in public safety that were cut in previous years. So those increases in public safety are staffing and related to bringing dispatch fully online and then the fire department online.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, not that, I wasn't trying to put anybody on the spot, but it's a fair question because they're part of our budget.
It's gonna be asked.
It's gonna be asked, yeah.
And there's obviously some concern with it because
Yes.
it's been going back and forth since the meeting last week.
Right.
About what is this number and what does it mean?
Right.
So I guess it's just up to interpretation.
Well, it is. I mean, part of, I don't want to keep going, but part of it is that if you look at the numbers post the cuts that everyone made in 2011 and FY12, sure, it looks like the town has grown 40% since then, because we were reinstating things that were cut in previous years, so it looks like a lot of growth. So for us, it's just getting back to maintaining where we were. If that's not the case, it's additional growth over there.
Still aren't even at
It's not- There's no apples to apples
Yeah,
with
yeah.
these budgets, so just...
All right. Any other blissful news on the budget?
It's great. So public, like I said, FinCom meets on Wednesdays. We'll have a joint budget meeting, I think it's on the 25th of March, in which you will jointly agree to a budget that was brought to the floor for town meeting, and then a public hearing will be held, I think, second Wednesday in April, and then it's on to town meeting.
Will you work with the assessor to see if you can squeeze another 18 grand out of this?
I'm trying to actually,
Yeah.
I'm trying to get it on the, I think it's on the I believe it's actually on the expenditure side.
Okay.
I don't think it's on the revenue side.
Okay. I still think that we can take a conservative approach and still be able to, $18,000 out of the,
Potentially, yes.
yeah, so, all right.
We can't certify a negative budget.
There always is,
Yeah.
our savings account, but we don't really want to do that.
No, we don't.
Does the board at this time have an opinion on how we're going to finance the school?
I think that's up to the school to bring the question for
We've
an
already come before finance committee,
Yep.
made their case.
Yeah, I don't know.
Decision has been made by finance.
Well, let me,
I believe we're going to wait to see, take direction from the board of selectmen.
well, let me answer your question. So, my opinion is that we've already presented in the budget the amount of money that we can afford to give them. That's my recommendation, from my seat. Right? Now, if they choose to go for an override, that's their choice, and it'll be up to the taxpayers.
We also don't have a certified budget from
Right.
the school committee yet, so
Yeah, right.
March 9th.
Does that answer your question?
Yes,
Okay.
for now.
Yeah. I mean, I would have to say that if they need, if they're gonna certify the budget at what they presented, then they'll need an override.
I'm just asking so that I can relate it back to the FinCom, which way, again, we all want to be on the same page.
Of course.
We don't want to misspeak
Yeah.
and say something that we shouldn't say.
Yeah, I mean, we haven't certified our budget yet, but, taking the recommendations and what we just went through right now and the amount of money that we're planning on giving it to them, I'm gonna take that recommendation. I think we need to move forward with that, and I think we need to make up 18 grand.
Right.
Once we do that, we have a balanced budget. That's a budget that the Board of Selectmen can now present to the FinCom.
Okay.
All right, so let's, talk about, so we've talked about budget, we've talked about revenue,
We talk about the warrant very quickly.
very quickly.
For me.
Yep,
So we are receiving articles until tomorrow, Thursday, right, sorry. Till Thursday. Technically, we're gonna have one more we're gonna have your official first pass next Tuesday at our meeting. That was our scheduled first pass. They basically left this on this week as a reminder to anyone who is considering an article that they need to get it in, now. Time is up. I we'll go over what's on there, what's not next week. We need to talk about, the ones we already talked about for the board, basically, for the board's position and what we're gonna put. But other than that, that's all on the warrant for now. Just as a reminder to people who may be considering articles, it's this week, and then we will review them on next Tuesday. And if you have an article on there, you should be present to talk about it.
Okay. I'm sure you'll send out reminders.
Yes.
Okay. All right, so we don't need you for approval of meeting minutes. I know you got to get going. And are we going to postpone executive session, or are we still going to do it?
No.
It'll be quick?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, so,
I move to approve meeting minutes 10:15, 19, 11:12, 19, 11:20, 19, 11:25, 19.
Second?
all right, all in favor?
Aye.
All right. All set on that. And Laura, you know that I wasn't there for some of those, so I'll just abstain on those. All right. And then, so, other topics not reasonably anticipated 48 hours, there's none. So, I'll take a motion to enter into executive session.
I think that's you.
That is me. I move to enter into executive session under purpose 3 to discuss strategy with respect to collective bargaining with the Men in Police Civilian Dispatch Union, Local 188A, and purpose 2 to conduct collective bargaining session with the Men in Police Civilian Dispatch Union, Local 188A. Roll call is needed, and we will only reconvene to adjourn.
Second?
All in favor?
Tenio, aye.
Real eye.
Burke, aye. All right, thank you very much, everybody.